Okay, so what I'm going to talk about this evening is this idea of the difference between how motherhood is often sold to us and how it can really feel for many of us along a continuum, but something we often keep completely hidden from those around us. And what I'm particularly passionate about at the moment is really trying to get some change out there, some conversations going around how we do struggle and how that's got nothing to do with how much we love our baby or how much we actually want to be a mother to that baby, but more the context that we're trying to be mothers in. So if you start Googling image of a new mother, you get image after image that basically looks like this. You have a mother who is smiling, who is usually wearing pale coloured clothes. Her hair is perfectly done. Her nails are done. She's got a lovely baby. The babies are never newborn babies because we know that they seem to be cutest for photos at around this age. And she's often got a doting partner with her at some point. And was sold this image. And I then started Googling motherhood quotes and went down, quite a rabbit hole here. But this was one of my favorite ones. So there are hard days in motherhood, but looking at your baby sleeping reminds you why it's all worth it. And I think those of us with older children after a hard day have probably gone into a sleeping child's room and gone, okay, they're lovely whilst they're asleep. But this concept there of new motherhood being about your baby sleeping and you spending all this time sort of gazing at them sleeping in some sort of little happy bubble seemed again to be completely at odds with what women tell me and what women share with each other, often in secret, because they're too scared to say it more publicly. Although on the same set of quotes, I did really like this one. So babies are the worst roommates. They're unemployed and they don't pay rent. They keep insane hours. Their hygiene is horrible. If you had a roommate that did any of the things babies do, you'd ask them to move out. And I thought just the sentiment behind this, it is said in a comical, jokey way. But actually, when we start thinking about all the stress and strains that new mothers are under and the lack of value and support they often have around that, then this is a really clear point. We might, after a hard day, go for a drink with friends and complain about a relationship or family member or partner or whoever. We come home after a long day at work and complain about that. And people understand, they complain with us, they sympathize. Are we allowed to do it in the same way when we've had a really hard day and night with our baby? Are we allowed to say, you know what, I'm utterly fed up. I've had enough of this. I want to run away? Because that's how many of us feel when you start digging under the surface. It can be temporary. We can love our babies very, very much. But it's the other emotions that go alongside it, particularly how challenging it can be, that we don't often talk about. So if you actually go to the literature and start kind of digging around the research, you'll actually find quite a number of papers that go against this idea of the idyllic, happy, glowing, sunshiny motherhood. There's some really interesting work and books written around actually how motherhood can be full of all these different emotions. It can be full of love, it can be full of positive moments, but also it can be full of really dark emotions and really challenging times, especially when you're in a context where you're not well supported. So they've done quite a bit of research on how happy parents to be and new parents are. And what's quite interesting is that once you get past the early months of pregnancy and you're getting towards the end of pregnancy, on average, because obviously everyone is different, your kind of life satisfaction and happiness really peaks there. Just before the baby is born, you're really excited and you're usually in that little bubble after birth. But then for women in particular, it actually starts to decline. And that's not because they don't love their baby or they don't want to be a mother or they'd rather none of this had happened. It's often because of all the context that goes alongside that. So they have that love and they have that form of connection to their baby in different ways, but they also are experiencing relationship stresses and changes to their life, and they're not getting much sleep, and their overall satisfaction declines. Their relationship satisfaction also declines in that first year. It declines slightly for both parents, but much at a steeper rate for mothers. It does go back up again as women in particular get kind of used to it and get into the flow, and their baby becomes a little bit more dependent and not needing the same sort of intensive care all the time, and things start to settle into a pattern. It does start to go back up again, but that's usually at around the age that children are going to school. And Adrienne Rich, who was an author back in the 70s, writes extensively about this, and this is one of my favourite quotes which sums it up. So my children cause me the most exquisite suffering of which I have any experience. It is the suffering of ambivalence, the murderous alternation between bitter resentment and raw-edged nerves and blissful gratification and tenderness. That rocketing between different emotions, those moments when you look at your baby and you genuinely think, this is lovely. It's usually after you've had a bit of sleep and your baby is actually having a nice, content day. You rarely wake up for the 5th time in the middle of the night and think, wow, I am so blessed. I cannot get enough of this. This is the best, happiest time of my life. But society tells us that that's what we should be thinking. We often go along with it on social media. There's increasing research that shows that across our life, we lie on social media. So either through omission and leaving things out, by bending things, by just showing our best bits, or actually downright lies. So we could have had the most awful day, but we feel that we have to portray an image that says we're having a lovely time. And that's particularly true when it comes to new motherhood. Some very interesting research showing the kind of circular effect where mothers went onto places like Facebook and Instagram, and they saw these wonderful, lovely, happy families, happy photos, you know, partners kind of saying how lucky they are to have this new mother in their life, and all these just gleeful, lovely experiences. It's always sunny as well. And they've had a dreadful day and they're covered in milk and they've been sat on the sofa and they're sleep deprived and they're crying and they think, well, what's wrong with me? I need to put a beautiful post up as well. So they post saying, I've had such a lovely day. I'm so blessed. And they get the reinforcement from that. You get everybody liking and saying how wonderful you are and how good a mother you are and how lovely your baby is. And we get stuck in this really sort of strange mix-up of emotions when we're not sharing the actual facts and we're not opening up and actually sharing how we might be feeling under all of this. And a couple of years ago now, I actually started talking to parents for, I was going to wave this book at you, which you actually can't see on my little screen. Let's talk about the first year of parenting, the one we forgot to put in, about actually how they honestly felt when they had their baby for the first time. And I'd put up a Facebook post and I'd shared it on Instagram and Twitter, and I must have had about 500 responses and personal messages. Just this outpouring of sharing about how people really, really felt. And that the more they read how other people felt, the more they suddenly felt validated and seen, and that this was all right. And it wasn't a sign that there was something wrong with them. And it wasn't a sign that they were a bad mother or that they weren't doing this really well. And there was just this real pattern in the posts where someone would share something and then they'd go, oh, that's actually the first time I've ever told anybody this. I've talked about not falling in love immediately with my baby and it taking weeks, even months to really feel that connection. And I've never written that down. I've never said that out loud. I pretended to everybody that as soon as I saw that baby, I fell deeply, deeply in love with them immediately because that's what everybody else was telling me should be happening. And the women who were sharing this with me, they weren't just new mums. They were grandmothers. They were women in their 60s and their 70s suddenly saying, I'm just so glad I came across this post. It's like this really honest version of motherhood. And it's not that I don't love my baby, and it's not that I'm not grateful for them, and it's not that I don't want to be a mother. It's just that nobody talks about the mixed picture. Everyone pretends it's this perfect little bubble and perfect images of these happy families. But these were some of the things that parents talked to me about. So that concept of not falling in love immediately with your baby, so common. often not talked about. I mean, you know, you've just had a baby, you've just gone through birth, you're exhausted, you may be in pain, you may be processing all sorts. To then immediately be expected to have this blissful experience is actually the strange thing. Grieving for your old life, and again, it doesn't mean that you don't love the life that you've got. It's perfectly normal in any other circumstance in life to be able to move on positively, but still have those thoughts about what you've left behind. So you might get a brand new job and really love it. It's the job of your dreams, but you miss your old colleagues and you miss the cafe down the road, you know, and you miss the place that you worked in. And we understand that. Or you move area and you miss the local park, you miss your neighbours, you miss that part of the country, while still really loving where you've moved to. But for some reason, we don't talk about it so much, and life has changed, and it's changed for quite a considerable amount of time for most people. The feeling that you've lost your identity, that you've become mum, that you now are spending your day caring for a baby and you don't have much to share other than, well, I fed him and I changed him and I tried to get him to sleep and that didn't work, so I fed him again and then he needed changing again. You haven't got those experiences in your day-to-day life that you're used to having. Feeling trapped, wanting to run away. So many people said to me, I had these days where I just wanted to get in the car and drive as far away as possible without anybody. I didn't want anybody to touch me, to talk to me. I just wanted to sit in silence. Or other mothers were saying, I felt absolutely trapped because I was desperate to have a break. All I could focus on was I need a break from my baby. But at the same time, the idea of leaving my baby was absolutely petrifying. So it was this juxtaposition between desperately wanting something, but really not being able to have it, even if somebody offered it to you. And feeling incompetent, that everybody else knows what they're doing. Seeing people walking past your window, looking like they know everything about your baby, and looking at your baby and thinking, well, I don't know what's going on. What's wrong with me? And another emotion that we really don't talk about much when it comes to new mothers is the concept of postnatal rage. Now, I'm going to touch a little bit just later on postnatal depression and postnatal anxiety, and we understand those emotions, we expect them in some new mothers. But this concept has been really interesting me for quite a while, since I read about it when researching for this book, is how frequent actually feelings of really strong anger are on becoming a mother. So being angry at everybody around you, being angry at your partner, being angry at the situation, it's a combination of hormones and hormone change and the physical stresses you've been through. But actually, just like a lot of things in this experience, it's a really logical reaction to what you've gone through. So you've gone through this, and quite often, obviously not in every family, but quite often you're the one doing the majority of the work. You're the one being sleep deprived. You're the one doing all the emotional work, which I'll talk about in a little bit. It's just all these pressures, being not seen, being not valued, feeling that you've lost those opportunities around you. No wonder we feel angry. I think society sometimes thinks stereotypically it's just men who get angry. We expect them to go out and get angry about stuff. Might not be a good thing, but we understand that they do it. But actually, the number of women with that rage under the surface, and this is just from a blog article that I've got on my website. If you want to go and have another read of some more information about it, it's if you look for professoramybrown.co.uk, you'll find everything on there. But it's something that I think we don't talk about enough and is not expected. So women think, oh, I've got to hide this on top of everything else. And then something else that has been out in recent weeks and months as well is this concept of actually feeling really ambivalent about motherhood, or actually even regretting it. So the concept that you're really struggling with the concept of motherhood. And in the vast majority of cases here, it's nothing to do with your baby. You often love your baby very, very much, and you can have positive times with them. But actually, what you are feeling, anything from ambivalence to regret, is all the circumstances around this. So what has happened to your life and the impact on it and the context in which you're trying to mother in. So it's very, very much about the concept of regretting or just not enjoying the mothering role in the context in which you're trying to do it. And that itself is a huge product of the society and the culture that many mothers, particularly in countries like the UK, are trying to mother within. We don't have the layers of support and connection, so no wonder we're finding it challenging. And other aspects, such as really specific things, so feeling ambivalent or regretful about how many children you've had, so feeling that you haven't had enough or feeling that you've had too many, the sacrifices that you feel that you've had to make. You can regret the partner that you've had them with. You can have that ongoing feeling that you're not cut out for this, and you feel that you're just not a good enough parent for your baby, and you think, I shouldn't be the one doing this role. And there's been really interesting research just showing how common this is when you start talking to parents, but it's something we don't say out loud, because as soon as you say, I'm really not enjoying the mothering role, someone will go, what, you don't love your baby? And it's like, I didn't say that. I said, I'm struggling with the mothering role. I'm struggling with the day-to-day task. I love my baby very, very much, but everything else is overwhelming me. And nobody is coming along and supporting and caring for that. And on top of that, I'm feeling dreadful because now you're telling me you think I don't love my baby and are confirming my worst fears that I'm not cut out for this. And there are certain things that can make this really, really tough. So just the whole finding motherhood itself and that mothering role exhausting or just not for you, it's affected by all these different layers around you. So the biggest factor in all of this, I think, is actually how lonely and isolated a lot of new mums are. And that's not to say you don't have friends around you, but the way we now care for babies, become mothers, have that mothering role, is so much more isolated and lonely compared to how it would have been in decades gone by. And I don't want to romanticize, all of history in the past, but, there's certainly a real lack of connection, a lack of community connection. We know, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, it's been exacerbated by lockdown. But how many new mothers sit in the house on their own all day, or for most of it, with this very small baby? And then we wonder why they're finding it tough. We weren't designed to do this in isolation. We weren't designed to be caring for babies on our own. It was meant to be a group effort as such. It can be exacerbated by things, challenges that have come about from having your baby. So, there's this kind of myth that if you have a baby, it'll just fix everything. It will make life brilliant, when we know that can be very, very far from the truth. So it's thinking about how relationship difficulties can often increase after having a baby, or at least challenges, money difficulties. All of those things make it even more challenging. And again, it's not the baby, it's the role and the context in which you are. It's the way that, because we don't value and care and support for our new mothers, everybody's exhausted. You're not having a break. You feel like, you're doing everything yourself and you're feeling completely undervalued in all of this. I mean, logically, is it any wonder that we're now saying, help, I'm having these really, really difficult emotions around this. How on earth could it be something wrong with the mother? It's the context which she's trying to do all of this in. And this, if you haven't seen it, is the ongoing issue of the emotional load of motherhood. So this is from the French artist. She had, I think the book is called The Emotional Load. She's a brilliant cartoonist. This was from an article she had in The Guardian, just about this concept of the emotional load of motherhood. And it's a cartoon where someone goes round to her colleague's house and their partner is busy trying to feed the baby and cook the dinner and clean this and clean that, and a pot of food boils over, and the colleague jumps up and goes, oh no, what have you done? And she's like, well, what have I done? It's because I've done everything is the problem, and he says, well, you should have asked for help. And the concept of the emotional load is just all this effort that goes in particularly to caring for a baby, that is invisible, and that research shows falls really, really heavily, typically on women. So it's the concept that if the baby needs their nappy changed, somebody can come along and change the baby and go, ta-da, I've changed the baby, I've done this big job. And it's like, well, that was just the tiny end bit. You know, someone had to decide, right, the baby needs nappies. What size do they need? Which ones are most comfortable for them? Which shop sells them? Have we got enough in? Have we got the wipes? Have we got the bags? Whatever. All of that stuff is all the thinking and the continued thinking and planning that goes on behind it. And this is a lot of what mothers are struggling with when it comes to that mothering role, because often it just seems to pass to them. Some really interesting research just showing the degree of planning that they do in their everyday kind of mothering roles about, you know, thinking about what food does the baby need, and can they eat this and can they eat that, and what appointments do they need? All of that stuff is that pressing load on them, and that's why people are cracking. And women do feel this more strongly. Men, of course, can feel paternal ambivalence. They can have degrees of regret around having a baby, but women in all the research feel it far more strongly. And I don't know of any research that has compared a typical stay-at-home mum with a stay-at-home dad, but coming back to that in a second. Typically, and I know obviously all families are different, it's the woman who is carrying the load of the first year of parenting. It's her who's had the baby. She's had the physiological experience of birth. She's exhausted from that. She's usually got the physiological intensity of caring for the baby. It's usually her doing the feeding, doing the night wakings, or most of them. And again, you know, really stressing, all families are different. Across a population, this is what happens. It's typically her staying at home who has her friendships impacted, who has her social contact impacted, who has her career impacted. It's those connections that you get when you leave the house in the morning to go to work, the people you meet on your commute, even, you know, the person you buy your coffee from, all those little incidental conversations and interactions and chances to think about something other than being a parent really make a difference to a day. And when that's taken away from women because they're at home, are we really wondering why some women are struggling hugely with this? You also have the layers of societal attitudes and pressures. So we were joking about this the other day with a friend that I really feel, you know, if I was a dad, I would be, you know, there on winning medals in being a father, because, you know, working and caring for the kids and sorting everything out. And again, I'm joking slightly here, but it's the way that society in general will praise fathers for doing far less around their children. We've all seen, you know, the dad taking his baby out for a walk on the weekend and being praised because he's there doing something for the baby, when in fact he might be a stay-at-home father and this is completely condescending to him as well. But there are pressures on women to be that good mother, and there are pressures on women to enjoy this and love this new role in a way we don't expect of fathers in the same way. We put different pressures on them. Men feel a lot of pressure to be the breadwinner, to have that role, to be able to support their family, and that's a different thing. But women and the mothering role is something different in that way in terms of these pressures. There's also the impact of doing more. So this very interesting research down the bottom showed that when both parents are working, mothers on average still do more childcare and housework, even when hours in the workplace are equal. And working mothers do more childcare and housework when they've got a stay-at-home partner compared to the equivalent for working fathers. So we're still doing more and more and more. And we're seeing this career impact. So this again is in the background of when women have a career and they've got that job and what they want to be following, you see this impact on their wages, and you'll see graph after graph like this. So the one on the left is looking at women. So you can see as women come up here towards the average age of having a first baby, if they don't have a baby, their income carries on going straight up. If they do have a baby, they have that immediate hit to their income and they never catch up. And of course, this is on average. And this is the men who have children versus men who don't. There's very, very little difference. And actually, some research has shown that employers will actually be slightly more favourable to men who have a baby or a child at home compared to men who don't, because they're seen as more stable, they're seen as more reliable. There was one really interesting psychological experiment where they sent off fake CVs to a job application, and they had female names and male names, and they gave these fake candidates babies or not. And the women with babies were less likely to have a invite for a job interview compared to those who didn't, and the reverse was there for men. And it's just this concept of trying to catch up. And it's not all to do with working hours. Someone will always come along and say, well, the reason men earn more after having a baby is they do more hours in the office. And to a little extent, that's true, but research has shown it actually only explains 16% of this disparity. The rest is around just the pressures on mothers in general to do more of it, the views of society about working mothers. And if a woman has a career and she is the breadwinner and she's trying to care for this baby, again, where is the outlet to be able to say, I'm really, really struggling here? Why are we expecting anyone to be happy when they have the pressures around them? It can also be particularly stronger in older mothers. So there is research that shows if you have a baby later, you're more likely to struggle with postnatal depression and anxiety, but also you're more likely to struggle with the challenges of mothering. But there hasn't been a huge amount of research around why, but some of the reasons are around potentially more change to your lifestyle. So if you have a baby at 35 or 40, you've obviously had a lot more adult life to get used to certain things and certain amounts of money. You've had that comparison. And then maybe you're having a baby at a time when some of your friends are starting to get more time back for themselves, and you're seeing that real comparison. It can be physically harder when you're older. You can feel tireder. And there's also this greater pressure to sort of be a good mother who knows it all and knows what she's doing, because she's in her late 30s, early 40s. We have almost this terrible stereotype of younger mothers that they're not going to know what they're doing. And again, that works both ways, that then we place the pressure, we're judging the younger mothers and we're placing pressure on the older mothers, which are then feeling even more that they can't speak out. There's also a certain increased degree of planning and expectation involved. So you may have decided your whole life that you're going to wait until you're about 40 to have a baby. And you're building up to it and you're thinking, right, this is going to be really positive. Nobody's talked to me properly about some of the challenges of this. And it can hit you even more because you were just expecting something completely different, and you'd been expecting something different for a long time. That also ties in, there's some very interesting reading around IVF and emotions and guilt, that if you've had IVF, and particularly if it's taken you a long time to have that baby, that you really then struggle with saying, I'm finding this really difficult, because you really deliberately did this and you feel that you've been lucky or you've been gifted or you've put so much into this. But again, of course, we can talk about how challenging it is. And really, it just comes back to this. We have a very, skewed idea if we're expecting everything about motherhood to be absolutely glowing and wonderful and everybody to be happy all of the time. Women love their babies very much. They value being mothers. They don't want to change it. But also we need more recognition and support around this, because we spend a lot of time in psychology trying to differentiate between a clinical mental health issue and a normal logical reaction to circumstance. And if you sum up motherhood, you're not sleeping, you're sleep deprived, you're exhausted, you're lacking the social connections that you used to have. Yes, you may have new ones, but you're still lacking the old ones. You can feel unsupported, you're missing things you enjoyed, you're not having a break, life is repetitive, you're not valued, you're having this judgment and pressure. Is it any wonder that we struggle with that role and that we're having challenges? And just something I was thinking about as I was writing about this morning, society has a really vested interest in trying to get mothers not to talk about this. Because if mothers start talking about it, they're going to realize just how much value and worth they have. There's all those studies that add up how much having a stay-at-home mother is worth in terms of income, and it's like a 6-figure salary if you had to pay out for all those different things. And if we stop doing that, or if we demanded value and money even in response to this, society would completely fall apart. It's based on the unpaid work of women is sort of propping society up in a number of ways. We know that through caring for our older population and the impact there of all that free labour as such in that care. So it thrives on mothers questioning their emotions, of feeling that they can't speak out for fear of being accused of not loving their baby, when actually you're in an extremely powerful position. We should be talking about this more. And of course, we've had the impact of lockdown and how different things will be. And some research that I've been doing, talking to new parents, it's so common and so normal to be feeling regretful about the timing of having your baby. And there's nothing wrong with saying that. It doesn't mean you don't want your baby, that you'd like a different baby, that you'd like them to go away. But actually saying, this has been so tough on me. I haven't had the experiences I thought I would have. I haven't had the support that I needed. I haven't had the services in place. And actually, I have friends and family who have never held my baby. I have so many stories of mothers saying, nobody has held my baby apart from a health professional and my partner, and that's it. This has been so different to how we thought it would be. And to be able to say, it has been so tough, we should be able to say that out loud. And just generally, I did laugh at this picture, right? This is your average mother here. This would be idyllic mother dream, I think, going and sitting on a beach, in the sun, having a great break. But it's just a reminder that we don't put ourselves first enough. We don't take that time to look after ourselves. We don't take that care of ourselves as we care for everybody else. We're too busy putting all that care into caring for our baby that we don't think about ourselves too. And sometimes we feel very guilty about the concept of taking a break for us, but really, A, you're hugely important, and B, do it for your baby. Your baby needs you in one piece. If you can't do it for yourself, do it because you should be loved and cared for and valued. And it comes into this wider concept that we just don't care for new mothers well in our society. We don't have that rest and value of them after birth. We don't come and look after them and care for them. Instead, we expect them to get back on with it and care for a baby whilst nobody properly cares for them. And where is that care and support and time for them that they so desperately need? Oh. And just a reminder, it's not a failure to ask for help. Something that a lot of mothers and parents in general struggle with is asking for help, for saying, you know what, I actually really need you to. So rather than the British, can I do anything to help? Do you need anything? And us saying, no, we're fine. Actually, to be able to say, yes, could you please do this? Or to reach out to services around you or support around you. I've got a real interest in the concept of counter-dependence. So we've all probably heard of codependence, where people are maybe overly reliant on a certain relationship. But you also have people, and this is very common in new mothers in particular, where you actually don't want to be dependent on anybody else. You're scared of it and you think that you don't deserve help and you push people away. And you deserve all the support you can get, and know that it is out there through contacting your midwife, through contacting the support services around you. And just to finish, I've talked very much about this concept of normal logical reactions and the support and opportunity we need just to be able to talk to people around us and say, you know what, this is really tough. I need your help. I'm really struggling with this. I need you to do something so I can have some sleep or a break. But just if you are feeling any of these things, so if you're feeling continually anxious or miserable or low or really very angry a lot of the time, you're having trouble sleeping, you've got eating too much, eating too little, you're feeling hopeless or worthless or not being able to feel anything at all, reach out to your midwife, to your health professional, because there is so much support out there for you. You can get better. You can have a more positive future here. It doesn't have to feel this way, even though it really might. And it's nothing to do with you. Much of postnatal mental health issues are around the way that we're not caring for and then we're not supporting new mothers and new families. And it's about reaching out for that support that you need. So just to finish, I thought I'd leave you with this, that always remember that you matter too, that you do matter in all of this, that to be ambivalent or fed up or having a really bad day or just desperately wanting a break is such a normal reaction. I always think, think of yourself as a childcare worker. If you went out to a nursery with young babies and did an 8-hour shift and came home and said, oh, I'm so tired, I really need a bath and a nice dinner and an early night, everyone would go, oh, of course you do. What you do is absolutely amazing and so hard, I couldn't do it. So why don't we treat mothers in the same way when they're doing a 24-hour shift 7 days a week?
Thanks for watching this video from the Maternity and Midwifery Forum. For more expert opinion and analysis, hit the button below to subscribe.